Good morning. All right. Let's see. I wanted to grab, I think, this one. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. So I think we've got everything kind of set up here. I want to go through and just kind of reassert this color palette I intended to use, partially by filling in some of the shadows and things with a tint, a pale tint. So I'm gonna kind of go through and adjust that, and that'll help me get set up for the future. So a little bit of white, a little bit of this blue and purple. Maybe spray some retarder on here. Spread it out a little bit. Let's see, yeah, that'll be good. Just want to kind of reassert this color palette in here. So do it somewhat transparently. I'm kind of bring it back in control. Create a little more atmosphere without losing the details. That way, start with this purple. And come back with some blue. So that's going to be the plan for the morning, is to kind of get this reasserted. Got these blues. That feel better. I'm just trying to reassert some of these color relationships, starting with the shadows. All right. All right, let's go back to the line. Let's see. All right, and then we need some more of these oranges and yellows. into the light side of things. Let's see. That side. Let's see. Good morning. Alright, let's see. Gosh. Mm-hmm. Mm, yeah. Alright, that brings it back into line. Appreciate that. Over there on Twitch. Appreciate it. Just kind of reasserting my color palette I wanted on there because I've been working on the drawing mostly. No, I'm probably about. I would say in terms of time, I'm probably about halfway done. So, um, level of finish I'm looking for is similar to these other ones I've done recently. So like this one or this one or even this little simple guy right here. Um, so like I've got everything in place, and now I have to go through and like really refine things, and that takes a lot of time. Um, one of the things I like to point out to my students, I teach at a university, but one of the things that I like to point out to them is that um, it does take just time to really refine something. Yeah, that's all hand drawn, painted, etc. Yeah, those are all similar to this, just little acrylic paintings. But um, so I teach at a university art stuff, and so one of the things I really try to emphasize to my students is kind of a double set of Pareto principles. So if you have like say 10 steps to making a painting, from coming up with the idea to collecting your reference, etc., to doing the drawing and the design and the final painting and the rendering and all that. Say there's 10 steps, you should be able to get the first 8 steps, so 80% of the steps done as quickly as possible. And then what that lets you do is spend the 80% of your time. So you should be able to get the first 8 steps done in 20% of the time, and then get the last, be able to spend 80% of the time on the last 2 steps. And so um, that's kind of the goal here, is that I've kind of got it through that. Well, I've actually gotten past the first 8 steps a while ago, but so I got past the starting phase already. But Um, but if I can spend, the bulk of the time really getting into the nitty gritty of the painting, um, that's where um, that tends to be the what I want to be able to do. So I can really get in there and really, really make a very finished, refined painting or illustration. I am working on a comic. So if you go over to Rainland Studios, which I think is probably linked somewhere over on Twitch, pop-up will come up to get on the waiting list. I'm working on one actively. As a pitch project, I'd like to send out to publishers, and depending on what they say, I'll do that, or maybe try it as a crowdfunder. Oh, excuse me. But I'd like to get people onto an email list, so when it comes out, I can notify as many people. Hopefully, make it a nice, successful project. I've been working on a bunch of speculative pages over the last couple months, and covers and things like that. And it's come along. It's about a colony on a distant planet from Earth, and they're in a lot of trouble, and they have uh, found out that there's another crashed colony ship, and they send out a ranger to go out and to scavenge its, find out what's on it, bring back that information, and hopefully help the colony last longer. And he goes out all by himself into the dangerous areas of the planet and uncovers certain things that make him that adjust his perspective on what's going on with the colony. It's kind of like, well, I watched, I've seen Lost. I haven't seen The 100. This is a little different situation. I think I haven't. I'm not familiar with The 100, but this is the planet is has like some weird properties to it. So it looks like a giant tangle of plants, like so the plant is called BR13R, so briar, right? And looks like has that appearance, and so. But I haven't seen the 100. I remember that being like about some kind of like new colony on Earth or something like that or whatever. Um, yeah, but humanity sent out like a multi-generational colony ship, and so they spent hundreds, not a couple thousand years in space traversing the gap between here and there. And anyway, yeah, they settle on this planet, and the main character in question, he was part of the last group that went out to do a scavenge on another ship, and it went terribly. It was a big disaster, and they lost most of the supplies, and the entire scavenging crew dies. And he's the sole survivor, including his father who died. He thinks he saw something during that trip, but his father, as he's dying, swears him to secrecy. So, and then the story is set like 30, 25, 30 years later, uh, when this new thing starts to occur. So, but yeah, it's a story. Yeah, so well, I'm hoping to do it as like a monthly thing. We'll see how it goes. If I do it as a Kickstarter, then I'll do like a certain chunk at a time, I guess, for that story. The plan for it's laid out across 12 issues, including probably a few where it's like he's mostly just kind of walking through some of the structures of the planet. So the planet that they're on, there's evidence of a prior civilization, but they're all gone. Like there's not even any biological remains of this prior civilization. Only artifacts and kind of strange structures scattered around the planet. And and so part of the story is him encountering the effects of that past civilization on the planet and what it means for the humans that are living there. Yeah, I could do the webcomic thing, but I think I'd like to do something like if I can't get a publisher, then I'd probably do a crowdfunding thing. I'd like to stick to print for the most part rather than digital. Um, because part of the storytelling of comics, especially when you're laying it out, like you're anticipating people turning pages. Whereas like web comics, it's just the image or however it's laid out. Um, but it's harder to kind of anticipate that experience. Like, I've got a bunch of comics on Kindle, formerly, Comixology, from when I was living overseas, and I know that the experience reading those is very, very different than reading an actual comic book. Um, because you don't have the page turns on it. You just have page to page rather than actual page turns, and that makes a big difference for how a comic is actually read. Um, and so, but yeah, I'm going to keep working on this story. I think I know exactly where I want to go with it. I've done about 23 pages, including a couple of covers over the last little while, and trying out different things stylistically with it. So I know some comic book people at the university I teach at where they do that professionally. So I want to run it by. Now I'm actually kind of taking a break from working on it right now to work on some of my other projects. Um, like I was reworking my portfolio website, that Rainland Studios site, and kind of updating the shop in there. I put my templates for that I've made for myself in there as well. Um, so um, I spent a bunch of time doing that. Actually, one of the reasons I did that was actually I got COVID a couple weeks ago, so I was really sick for about a full week. I missed all my classes that week. I felt really bad about that because I'm like, we're kind of coming up on the end of the semester, and we do have a lot of work time in class, so I guess it's not that dramatically bad. But um, oh yeah, I first started collecting comics in the '90s, so I my first comic books were X-Men #1 and Uncanny X-Men 281. And so that was Jim Lee and Will Portatio. So the first time I walked into a comic shop in Georgia, where I was living at the time as a kid, middle school. I guess that'd be eighth grade. And a friend of mine was like, "Yeah, let's go to this comic shop." I'm like, "What's a comic shop?" And I didn't know that it existed. Like the only comic I think I'd read before was like stuff that was in the house. Like I think there was like an Empire Strikes Back uh, graphic, like a comic book or whatever that was like a retelling of it. It was a large format from one of my uncles that had been left behind. And then but I never really read them very much. And then when I go in there and I see, Jim Lee's artwork and Will's Portations, I'm like, what is this? Like I've never even seen anything like this before. It was like a big thing. And then I wanted to do comics earlier on when I was a teen, as I kind of grew up um, into a teenager. And then I found out comic artists only make a small amount per page. I didn't know anything about royalties at the time. And so I didn't realize that the payment they got, the page rate, was actually an upfront payment on future royalties. And so comics aren't selling all that well right now, so they don't get a lot of royalties. But back then, Jim Lee was selling like millions of copies, or the average comic was selling 100,000 copies, which meant a significant payment back to the artists based off of those sales and on those royalty payments. Um, um, so I didn't realize that at the time. So I kind of backed off of comics, and when I was in college, I shifted to doing concept art and painting, and that's mostly what I've done professionally, in addition to the teaching that I've been doing for a long time. Yeah. Well, what's nice about comics, compared to film, is that you can still use like the cinematic language of film in comics, right? It has its unique properties, but you can also do that. And what's nice about it though is like you have an unlimited budget. You can set your comic wherever you want, in any country, in any time, and anything you want to invent. And even if you're just the author, or not just, but like if you're the author, not the artist necessarily, like you can still set it however, whenever, with whatever you want. And the cost for entry is so much lower. Well, film, there's been a lot going on with film lately that's kind of reduced the cost of entry as well, right? So the fact that like Blender or Cinema, not Cinema, DaVinci Resolve is free. Um, that kind of thing where you've got very easy access to really inexpensive tools. Or like, there's films that are being shot for very little money relative to the past, and that's a big deal, right? So like, there's the was Iron Lung came out this year, was shot for a very small amount. I really like the first Ready or Not movie, and that was shot for a few $1 million, I think. Or Godzilla Minus One, very effects heavy film. The creator was shot, with like basic cameras. So I think there's just more opportunity to do lots of stuff these days. Um, like what was Napoleon Dynamite shot for? But yeah, yeah. I actually knew a bunch of the people that worked on that film. I didn't know the director or the main actor, but I worked at a video game company in Utah a long time ago, where a lot of them are actually working. That was like their regular job, because I think Napoleon Dynamite was less than $1 million and made a ton of money. Um, a lot of it was kind of quasi volunteer work too. Like, I don't think everybody that worked on it really got paid until later. But yeah, so I think it's just there's a lot that's really really possible these days. Um, how's Bosch doing? My dog's over there. I have a feeling he's picked up some fleas now that we're into spring weather, so I need to get him back in the bath. It's been a couple weeks since he's had a bath, but um, um, but he's been starting to chew on his tail and hip area a little bit recently. So I'm wondering if he's picked up a little friend. So I think we'll get a bath. And, he doesn't know that word, so. Well, I think what was it? Memento. That's black and white, and that made what's his face a really big name to everybody, right? Oh, okay. It's been a while since I've watched it, but yeah, but it's a pretty heavy black and white film. And I think Nolan, he made that one relatively, late. Was like he made that he like had taken a break or something from making films and then made that. Um, and that was relatively inexpensive too, if I recall. Um, yeah, but again, I think there's just a ton of opportunities to do things. We look at like the that animated film Flow, right? That came out was it last year with the cat floating through the space and the big aftermath. And that was, made for $4 million, which is funny because like OpenAI, they were gonna fund this other animation for $30 million. This AI animated film that they were going to fund, and now they're killing Sora, so I guess that's not going to happen. Which I thought was really funny, but um, that made me laugh. Um, so again, and they did that in Blender with like Blender's basic rendering system. Like they didn't even do it in the high end one. It was the basic Eevee one, um, which is amazing, right? So yeah, I'm so the university I teach at, like they are really pushing AI inside of the university, and I'm getting all kinds of pushback from even my own department, which is an art department, on it, where they're like, no, we need to like have a mature attitude about this. And I'm like, what? Like that's interesting framing, first of all. Second of all, like even if I always like to point out, says like my moderate position on it is, well, even if it's required of the students to use later on, we don't add anything to their actual abilities by requiring it now. Like, they don't learn anything by putting it into their education now. And I think it's really harmful to do that. And they look at me like I'm a crazy person. I'm like, well, don't you guys remember like NFTs like 6 months ago? Like, don't you have any like short term memory, much less long term memory about recent history? And um, um, so most of the students don't want it too, which is interesting because the way you hear people talking about, like, I guess maybe when it's outside of their interest, like maybe my students do use it for like essays in classes they don't want to take, like non-art classes. But um, I don't see any indication within the program that any significant numbers of students, maybe like 0.5% of them or something, think it's a good idea. Yeah, my last art, I was at Ringling College of Art and Design in Florida before I came up here to Virginia. I'm at Virginia Commonwealth University, and they the department I was in, motion design, they were really pushing it just as I was leaving. The students are really upset by it. Like they don't want it. Like what is this for? And um, so so yeah, but there's a bunch of people in my department that are really pushing, and they refuse any kind of information. They'll tell me they're data dependent and then refuse any information that counters their perception. Like I point out, even if like a lot of the ethical issues around, say, copyright or even the environmental stuff gets solved, like there's studies showing how it negatively hurts how people are able to think, um, how it breaks people's minds because it lies all the time, or doesn't lie necessarily. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really good. Like, I appreciate that they're willing to do that. I think they need to speak up more in their classes. I wish they would. I think the problem I've kind of run into is that they're hesitant to say anything, and they need to speak up a lot, like all the time, like nonstop, and complain and say, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are we doing this? Like, this is a bad idea. We don't want to do this. We refuse to participate." Because you can't fail everybody. And so, like, if nobody wants to do it, or almost nobody wants to do it, then project's over, right? You got to come up with the teacher has to come up with something else. And I think if the students would speak up more about it, I think it would have a big impact. But they're always hesitant to do so. And I can help them out. Like I can help have conversations, explain better ways of doing things. But um, so um, So I wish they would. I talk to them about it all the time, but like there's a weird kind of sense of the new kind of Zoomer generation kids where they are both like outspoken and like when they're online or whatever, but in person like they're absolutely timid. And I don't know what's like the boundary is or whatever that they need to cross to kind of make that more possible. Yeah, so I think I don't for me it's like part of it's like I can't fight it by myself. Like there are other faculty that are against it, but they don't tend to speak up very much about it, or they're not as informed about it as they need to be in order to disagree. And I'm over informed. Like if you go check my Instagram stories, I'm posting news stories like sometimes multiple times a day that I'm finding online that are dealing with the issue, and I feel obligated to actually understand it in a way because I'm trying to argue with these people in my department. And the other problem with facing university is that there is funding going towards it. So like Meta or Microsoft or Anthropic or OpenAI, they're throwing monies at university. They're taking some of their stuff and like throwing it at us in order to like propagandize students. Like the students are being made told to read certain books during the year, or especially when they're freshmen, they're given like a book. I think last year's or this year's was some kind of nonsense about AI, and so there's all this kind of corruption at this level where people are getting research funding for it, and but um, yeah. So, um, but yeah, but again, these other faculty members like that are against, like they need to learn and pay attention. I know they're busy; they've got families and all that, um, but in the face of the argument, well, the big argument that I tend to hear from those supporting AI is that it is the future, right? That it's as bad as it will ever be is the argument, but it's actually there's evidence that a lot of it's actually gotten worse over like the actual ability of these generative algorithms. Like there's a certain degree that there's certain evidence that they've actually gotten worse. Like there's the Claude coding app there's some studies showing it's gotten 67% worse over the last however long. And that's just because of how these large language models work, right? They're intersecting probabilities of answers, you know, kind of reasserting different kinds of tokens in order to the different bits of data in order to produce a probabilistic answer. To me, that just sounds like a homogenation machine, right? How do we make everything predictable and the same? Um, yeah. So, um, um, so yeah, but yeah, definitely. Like if you have teachers and like if you're in school and your teachers are pushing on you, speak up. Like most of the students probably feel similarly, and the more that people speak up about it, the more uncomfortable it's made for them to push it on you. And professors are generally, art teachers and teachers in general, if anything, like they tend to be um, introverted to a certain degree and are hesitant to push back against any kinds of social pressure, I've found over time. So we have time, about 1 hour. Okay, about halfway done. I spend like 2 hours on this in the morning. Usually, I have to give my paint just enough time to dry out too. This acrylics I have outside. Yep, have a good one. I'll be on for like another hour, and yeah, get on that email list, so I can and let other people know who might be interested. Yeah, so I'll be working basically from back to front. Um, Good morning. Over there on Instagram. Good morning. People coming in. How are we doing out there, huh? Hello, Bosch. Welcome back. Good morning. Let's see. Oh, yeah, that's a little better. Good morning, people popping in. Happy Saturday. How we doing? Hour, a little over an hour. Okay, that's fine. I'm just kind of reworking some of these background areas as I'm stepping forward through the picture. morning. Good morning. And do let me know if there's any questions out there. Don't mind talking while working. Let's see. Good morning. Good morning. Definitely feeling more of what I wanted in here. See. Ah, let's see if we can't get some of these pinks in here. Good morning. Let's see. All right, let's work on her portrait for a bit today, huh? All right. Come up over here, put this here. Morning. All right, let's see. I need the lights to hit it. see. Good morning. Let's check in the chat real quick there. All right, let's see. Good morning. Let's see. How are we doing for time? It is one. All right, we got half an hour left. Perfect. Oof. I need to break out a new brush. Let's see. Face down value a little bit. That's better. More color on there. morning. Fix this nose up. Up. Slip of the coffee. Let's see what's next here. We got 10 minutes, 8 minutes. So what to do? What to push forward next? See. Let's see, where's my drawing it? All right, have a good. All right, a couple more minutes. Let's see. That's better. Good morning. Morning. About to finish up here for the morning, so I'll use up a little bit of this paint and then so I think made some good progress today. I went through and kind of readjusted the color on here so it's more in line with what I was going for originally. The drawing's still all under there, so and then I was kind of working back to front a little bit and a little bit over here. So that was today's progress. Hopefully move even further forward tomorrow. So thanks to everybody that came in. I appreciate it. And we'll talk to you all later.